love goes on, softly on. So don't be sighing or crying. Here live with our
Welcome to the fourth Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. Today, Rob Farley and I will be talking about Game of Thrones. We'll be talking about both how the second season ended and what we expect from the third season. There will be a short hiatus in the middle of the podcast in which we will do silly things so that those of you who don't want to hear spoilers can turn off your iPads if you're at the gym or iPods and do whatever you want to do. Or you could just continue listening to our silliness and then turn it off. Up to you. But I think we're going to start by actually, looking at the last episode of the third season because, well, for lack of a better way of putting it, a lot of shit happened. And we had, we already have Stannis being defeated. We have Arya getting out of Hanrahal. We have Theon getting his just desserts.
We have Theon delivering a lovely, as I noted at the time, that there was a resonance for LGM readers because he had a lovely sort of bully pulpit speech that was ended dramatically, having been relatively ineffective. But yeah, no, that was sort of a fantastic moment in the series.
Oh yeah, no, and I mean, on the one hand, it was nicely set up by all of the shofars blowing in the distance, and I think the line was good speech, didn't want to interrupt it. I think actually they liked the speech.
They did. I
mean, it was a great speech, but it was totally ineffective because, well, he's Theon. And that's all we'll say about that till after the spoiler section. Can't really talk more about Theon and his fate. But one thing we can talk about that is really interesting that I noticed just rewatching it this afternoon was that, well, one, it's very important that people get out of gates. So we had Osha leading Bran and Rincon and Hodor out of the gates in order to save them earlier. And then in this episode, what's his name? Jaqen had to help Arya get out of the gates of these kind of long, well-established, but peculiar for the world's Game of Thrones, haunted castles. I mean, both Winterfell and Hanrahal are considered to be creepier than the other castles. The ghosts still walk there, and in the spoiler section we'll talk about other reasons for that. But one of the things with Jaqen that I never thought of before, but seemed really, really sort of almost obvious in the way that they filmed it, is that after Arya escapes, right? Jaqen told just run. She runs, and then who does she meet on the road? Him.
Yeah.
And he's standing there, and she says, one day, or he says one day, he gives her the coin and says you should come to Bravos and yada yada. And I don't think this is very, I don't think this is in the books, but it certainly seems like in the series. And we could talk about the difference between books and series. But in the series, they're really setting it up to make it seem as if we've already met Jaqen, and the way that they tie it all together, right? He gives her a coin from Bravos, and she says, "I've already met someone from Bravos. My dancing master was from there." And he says, "Oh well, yeah, he was. He was he? You know someone from Bravos already." And if you go back to season 1, that great scene where Syrio and Arya are facing down 9 Lannister knights, and Syrio is about to beat the crap out of him with a stick. All he says to her at the end is that, what do we say to death? Not today. And then he tells her to run, and she runs. and then we cut away at him pulling up his broken sword, and he just took down 9 Lannister knights with a full sword. He only has to take down 1 with a broken sword. It's
Well, but he doesn't kill those knights, right? I mean, you can see those other knights, and they're not. Well, I mean, we shouldn't call them. Right? There is 1 knight there, and there are like 6 men-at-arms. Yeah, not to get all technical in terms of terminology here. But he doesn't kill them, right? And so they're actually standing up, and
well, they're starting to stand up and see.
Yeah, right.
They're getting up on their days.
I have seen this argument on the boards. There are advocates and there are detractors.
It's not in the books. I mean, it's definitely not in the books. But a lot of stuff that's in the series is not in the books at all. But Syrio, but we don't. I mean, Sirio's death doesn't happen on screen in the books either, right? Exactly.
Right.
And it's almost deliberate the way it's not on screen in the series.
Right.
And the fact that the Bravos connection, the way that the rhythm of the scene, in the 10th episode of the 2nd season, it's almost screaming to be read, like, come on, Arya.
Right.
Don't be a dipshit. Recognize him. Just because he has a different face doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Right. I mean, I want to sort of draw back here and sort of with regards to, and this, in this comparison in treating the books and the series, how well they have done in the series in terms of retelling Arya's story with significant details changed in the 2nd season, but in a very satisfying fashion. I mean, I don't know if you found this the case, but the interaction between her and Tywin is some of the most satisfying interaction of the entire 2nd season, and it doesn't. It's not in the book at all, right? I don't think they meet for more than a few seconds in the book, to my recollection.
No, you're right. And I do think it works because it's one of those moments of intimacy between, Lannisters and Starks that have been sort of played up in the series. Jon and Tyrion in the 1st episode, for example. I mean, that's in the book, but it's not quite as sweet. That they're traveling down the road, and Tyrion teaching Jon all about what a book is,
right,
and why it might be valuable, and that sort of leading to Jon being able to befriend Sam in a way that's meaningful. Right. That's really not in the book. Sam is sort of the only guy who will talk to Jon in the book. It's not this sort of, I need someone around me who can read, the way that the series does it.
Right.
But in terms of Arya, I mean, her story is, on the one hand, she's getting a bit of a short shrift in the series. She's just not getting enough screen time. Right. In the 2nd season. Her and Dany are both being, relatively trimmed, but hopefully that will stop in the 3rd season. We'll get, although I could do without Arya just wandering around for 3 books, but sorry, spoilers, I guess. Right. No, not really.
She's done that for 2 books so far, so.
Yeah.
Or two seasons so far.
And I mean, it's an important wandering. I mean, she's not doing nothing, but she's actually doing more in the series than she did in the books. In the books, she was just kind of lost. Right. In the series, she's acquired a series of purposes. I mean, infiltrating Tywin's inner circle is a pretty damn big accomplishment for her.
Well, and so this is interesting, and I think that, I mean, this is going to play into the conversation too. And I read an interview, and I can't recollect where it was, but where, and listen, if you haven't seen the 1st season, then just shut it all off right now, right? I mean, so you might as well just stop listening.
Yeah, Ned died. They cut off his head.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, and the chick in the crying game, dude.
Yeah. She was a dude.
So that the producers were not so worried about the problem of killing Ned Stark, right? Which, people who watch The Sopranos and The Wire and so forth have gotten used to having beloved characters die.
Also, Sean Bean. Have you seen the video, Sean Bean Must Die?
Sean Bean Must Die. That is crazy, right? Because I pointed out, I know you may have, but he doesn't die in Ronin, where every character dies. Or at least he doesn't die on screen.
It's one of his chapters, but there is actually a YouTube video that stitches together all of his death scenes. Right. It's like 4.5 minutes long.
Right.
Each clip is about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, GoldenEye is a particular classic. But the biggest challenge that they saw was not that you had to kill off the most sympathetic character in the series, but that the entire Daenerys Targaryen thread storyline happens entirely apart from the rest of the series, right? Now, correct me if I'm wrong. In the series to where we are right now, no character from the Daenerys storyline has interacted with any character from Westeros. Is that right?
Since the narrative began, yes, but obviously they have interacted in the past.
They have interacted in the past, but like in terms of like there is no.
There's no spoiler saying that Jorah Mormont is in fact the son of
the Lord Commander, so right?
Obviously, they have interacted.
Right, but not on screen, right? I mean, we've had like nobody has met here with Varys and then met somebody who's then met. I mean, I suppose maybe you could talk about the assassins in the first series, but even that is abstracted through like 3 or 4 more different lines, right? But I mean, thus far, it's almost as if it's 2 completely different series that are kind of approaching the same subject, right? And that's, I mean, let's not spoiler it, but that's kind of remarkable that they've managed to pull that off, right? And that they've managed to keep both sides of that relatively compelling. And I know that people have preferences with regards to what side that they like and don't like.
In terms of screen time, though, Dany got much less screen time in season 2 than she did in season 1. They really did emphasize Westeros in season 2, but yeah, there's been no connection, and I don't think it's spoiling anything to say that even in the novels, it's gonna be a while before you have any character who crosses.
Well, okay. I mean, we'll have to come back to this in the spoiler section because I think there's going to be one pretty soon. I mean, I would suspect there's going to be one in the first couple episodes. I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know how they're going to play it, but
all right, we'll get back to that. Yeah,
we'll get back to it in the spoiler section. But anyway, you had some thoughts about something, and you were proceeding before I interrupted you. So why don't we come back to those thoughts?
Oh well, I mean, I have lots of thoughts. I have a perfectly shaped notebook for my thoughts on the last episode.
I have no notebook. I do everything. My Viking helmet helps me think, and so
yeah, I don't trust my memory, and I do close readings of things, so I can't not write everything down. But one of the other things that I did sort of want to talk about was actually continuing with Dany was the scene of her in the House of the Undying, because that in terms of just like pure me as a film scholar, that scene sucked, given the way it was in the novel, right, where you had this sort of Borgesian labyrinth where she had to keep going 3 doors down into the right. And in the series, they sort of just were like, yeah, she got in the tower she shouldn't have been able to get into, and then she walked around.
Right.
And it really seemed to diminish her accomplishment.
Correct.
Make it seem, and I think this is sort of what I'm getting at in terms of talking about the next season. I think they're almost making it too easy for Dany, because she's going to be this sort of Abraham Lincoln figure. We know that. Not a spoiler thing if you've seen the ads for the next season.
You mean with the top hat and the beard?
Exactly. I mean, it's weird, but she can pull it off. She's no, actually, she can't. She looks terrible as herself. But I kid.
Well, let me and you're a Superman guy, right? I mean, to my recollection, no. In fact, I know you've written. I mean, you wrote.
Yeah, I've written
some very interesting sort of visual rhetoric about Superman Returns, right?
Yeah.
The Brandon Routh. The sequence at the House of the Undying, and I'll be fascinated to see if you had this connection as well. Had the same emotional resonance or the lack of emotional resonance for me as the scene in Superman Returns of Superman lifting the continent made of kryptonite and pushing it on pure will into space, right? That there was sort of no internal logic to it beyond, oh, we're supposed to believe that Superman really cares about this, right? And so, he's able to, through sheer will, push it into space, right? There's no complexity. He's not figuring out a way to get it into space, right? He's just pushing it. And because he cares about it so much, he's able to will it into space with his tremendous strength. And whereas in the book, Danny figures out, it's a very complex approach to her solving the riddles of the House of the Undying. In this, she sort of wills her way through the House of the Undying, and in the end it's solved with the relatively, oh my goodness, guess what? Dragons breathe fire. They never would have guessed that at the House of the Undying. And and which is not to say, I mean, there were elements of it that I liked, right? I mean, I liked the scene with Khal Drogo, right? I mean, I liked the scene where she's given this choice.
Well, it's very much like that old Buffy episode, Restless, right? It's a good dream logic scene in that she's opening doors into places they shouldn't open. Or my wife and I were just watching the fourth episode of the fifth season of Mad Men, where Don is he has the fever and he thinks he murders someone, but there's just this one hint at the beginning that he's dreaming, which is that when he tries to get her to leave, he opens a door in the middle of his kitchen wall and says, "Here, take the service elevator." Like that sort of nice dream logic,
Right.
I mean, we have a lot of that with Danny in the House of the Undying, but I think you're right. Once they have her chained, it really is. It has the emotional resonance of Superman throwing the crystalline continent into the sun. It's just, well, yeah, he's going to do it, and it's uplifting, and we like it because we are genuinely rooting for this character who has suffered, gone through trials, and is in her own way sort of blameless. We'll just forget about the fact that she actually has slaves.
Right.
She frees slaves, but she has slaves too.
Right.
Forget about that. I
mean, she's more of the Jefferson figure in some sense, right? Or maybe the Washington figure.
Yeah, but I mean, no one actually notices. I mean, when I teach this now, I've taught 8 or 9 sections of Game of Thrones, and Danny is sort of unequivocally sympathetic. No one even picks up on the fact that she's talking about treating her slaves better, not freeing them. And in fact, there's one scene that's particularly disturbing in the first season where she asks one of her slaves to teach her how to please Drago, which, when you think about it, is not just slavery. Now it's sexual slavery.
Right.
It's disturbing if you think about it, and I don't think they want us to think about it. But yeah.
There is a defense of that, right? I mean, that they kind of want us to find ourselves in the universe where the elite demand these sorts of things, right? But that's hard, right? It's hard to drag us into that universe, right? And since, I mean, Westeros is medieval England in some sense, right? So slavery, serfdom exists, but slavery doesn't quite exist, right? And for some reason, we are able to appreciate the relation between noble and serf. It's more intelligible to us than the relationship. And what am I saying here, right? It is more. We have a moral vocabulary that can think through the relationship between noble and serf in the way that is sort of harder in an environment in which slavery is fully accepted, right? The institution of slavery is accepted by slave and master, right? Which is, I think, how we're supposed to understand Essos and how it's supposed to be understood on Essos.
I'd agree with that. It's just, it's so easy for them to just paper over the fact that slavery is accepted, and Danny's a really, really kind slave owner. And I think a lot of that we'll talk about after we do the spoiler thing, because obviously there are moments for Dany where her position on slavery becomes a little more apparent. But going back to, it's weird, the whole idea of Superman Returns just brings up the idea of stakes, right? The whole lifting the continent into the air. It's a meaningless act of faith and goodwill. Like, we want Superman to do it. We know he's going to do it. He's going to try very hard to do it. But it doesn't really resonate for us the way that, for instance, at the beginning of the movie when he's stopping an airplane from crashing into a New York City landmark, that's not really any different in terms of what he's doing. He's just, right, he's not going to get hurt. There's no tension involved. Lois Lane's not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
All of it is us and our anxieties about 9/11, and
right.
We don't like airplanes crashing into New York City landmarks, but which sort of gets to the idea that there's a difference between these sort of empty gestures of superiority, such as Dany chained up. It's I guess Dany chained up. If they had done it right, it would have been like that moment in Return of the Jedi that we all loved when we were 14 years old, when Luke walks on the plank, right? And he looks up at this giant floating fortress, and he says, "All right, Jabba, I'm going to give you one last chance." Right? That's how that scene with Dany should have worked. It should have sort of marshaled all of our, but there wasn't enough of a threat.
Right.
For it to, and one of the things I wonder about is, and I wonder if this is why Martin hasn't sort of diminished her presence in the books to a certain extent and made her sort of, without being spoilery, made her sort of a bureaucrat in later books, is because he's just made her a little too powerful too quickly. Right? Oh, you're going to trap her in this magic castle and chain her up, and so her dragons will be chained. What will they do? Well, they'll melt the chains and,
Incinerate the bad guy.
Yeah. It's like, okay, well, what now?
Right. I'll be happy to talk about this in the spoiler section, right? Because I think it's going to be I think it will play out very well, sort of across.
It's going to be rousing.
Right.
I mean,
it's going to be very interesting. What do you think of the depiction of Mormont in this, and where the Mormont character is going? I guess I'm deeply pleased. I think that he's been played with, and I forget the name of the actor escapes me, but he's been, it's been a fantastic part of the series, his contribution to it. But
it's obviously he's playing the wizened old mentor role, and he's doing it well.
But he does show the chinks in that, right? You occasionally see he demonstrates that he's not just that. And because
it's Gandalf having a little bit more of an interest in Frodo.
Let's not call him Gandalf, right? Let's not call him Gandalf, because we're going to get a Gandalf figure in this part of the series. Let's not spoiler it, but we're going to get a Gandalf figure.
But in terms of a mentor figure, it is a little, and we can talk about this in terms of, we can talk about this in terms of the blog, like, the responsibility of professors to their students. And even if you have those feelings toward a student or toward your student population in general, Donald! Donald. You don't show it. And he's let those chinks show. Ooh, that sounds. I hope no one takes that out of context. But he really has basically announced, "Look, I know I've been helping you through all this since you were a child, but if you
we're
want
both
me,
single. We're both single.
why not? Not like we know anybody else here."
Right, exactly.
And I have saved your life a couple times.
Right.
Yeah, it's. To be honest, I find it incredibly creepy. For the same reason I find certain people in my staff meetings incredibly creepy when they talk.
But it's successfully creepy, right? In terms of the second season, it's really successfully creepy, right? You get a sense of how, and Dany gets a sense, I think, of how creepy it, but she is holding it at a distance. but there is sort of an agreed upon. This is a developing creepy dynamic here, right? Story at 10, that is going to play out in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and ninth seasons, as far as we know.
Yeah, and of course we do actually know, but I think that scene in the Valor Morghulis episode, the last episode of the season, where he's accompanying her down to Zaro's tomb or his vault to kind of see all of the money he has in there, and it's empty. And there's a really nice sequence where Danny looks at Zaros, and then she looks at her former handmaiden who had been with Zaros, because she was like, "Oh, I thought you were going to die in the House of the Undying, and so I just went with the rich guy."
Right.
And right before they're about to lock her in, they do this reverse shot to Danny's face. And at any time prior to this in the series, they would have cut to a shot of Mormont. They would have cut to see his reaction to her.
Right.
Instead, they cut to her face, and then they cut to the back of his head looking at her. And it's this nice little visual indication that he has lost control. That whatever designs he has upon her, and we can talk about that more later, but whatever designs he has upon her, he can no longer say anything.
Right. Well, I mean, we've had indications for a while that, I mean, the relationship between her and Mormont is not just a Frodo-Gandalf relationship, right? And this happens in the first season, right? That she genuinely surprises and impresses him, right? Our interaction between Frodo and Gandalf in Tolkien is of Frodo living up to Gandalf's expectations, right? Living up to the understanding that Gandalf has always known he can do. Right?
I knew you had it in you. Yeah.
Right. I knew you had it in you. But Mormont doesn't know that Danny. Mormont doesn't even suspect that Danny has it in her in any sort of meaningful sense, right? I mean, he has hints. There are hints and there are clues, right? She's a Targaryen. He, at least on a rump level, buys into some of the logic of why the Targaryens ought to rule Westeros, but he doesn't buy into much of it, right? I mean, it's a very sort of rump thing, and he's there because he was a slave or a Dead Stark made him go away.
He's a lot like a character out of a Bukowski novel. He's a drunk who's decided to put all of his cards on this one last chance, right. And he is regularly surprised that it's working out, and that it's working out better than he expected. Right. He's not just going to be managing that department store. There's a chance he might be able to ride this thing, all the way to corporate. And
right.
But as he sort of realizes that, I think there's a sort of balance. As he realizes that, Danny notices him realizing that, and stops trusting him, sort of, in direct proportion to his thoughts that he can, ride this thing all the way. And again, I'm trying to not get into any spoilers, but but yeah, I think he's an interesting character, but I think he's a limited one, and I don't think, even without already knowing what's going to happen, at least the way the series is setting up, I don't think he's long for relevance. He's going to try to be, but just that scene again at the and I'm a big stickler for structure, because most of the directors who work in Hollywood today actually grew up with things being on a week, and so the stuff at the end of an episode is more important because it's what you would have to remember for the episode next week to make sense. They're not Netflix people, and just the way that they did that, what should have been a reverse shot of her face and his face. Her face to the back of his head looking at her is just telling me that that's basically it for him in terms of his ability to... We're not even getting him appreciating what she's doing. We're just getting him observing.
We will definitely have to talk about this in the spoiler section. We should actually accelerate a little bit, because we've been talking for a while.
And we do have a 45-minute limit on this, don't we?
We should establish for ourselves a 45-minute. Because if
Oh,
that's
no,
true, we're already at 41 minutes. So
okay, I think it cuts off at 45 minutes, and so we'll have
hopefully
to.
we might have to restart. Which actually is perfect, right? If it's in 2 podcasts, then we don't have we don't have to worry about it. So let's talk about the war for a second, right? How the war is depicted, right? I mean, obviously, Blackwater is a fantastic episode. The destruction of Stannis' fleet, we presume in the series survival of Davos Seaworth, because I think it's visually suggested that Davos Seaworth survives. So there's no
Onions float.
Onions float, exactly. But Joffrey, both surviving and apparently prevailing at this point. And again, when we're talking about divergences from the book and the series, they have given so much more body to Robb Stark's wife than the book does.
I think they and this is something we should talk about after the spoiler section, because I had a thought today that rewatching these episodes that might make people crazy. So we'll just we'll put that in the spoiler section about Robb and his wife. But as for the war and the coming war, I think I think one, it's really telling that the episode opened first with Tyrion opening his eye and not knowing where he was and being disoriented, and then being told it's not the hand, and then we see the hand of the king, but the first thing we see of him is horse shit on the floor,
right?
Because we open with a shot of Tywin on a horse in the throne room, and the horse is shitting on the floor, and I think that's significant in terms of the kind of victory that he might have won at the last minute, and maybe he could have come sooner, but man, see, I'm trying not to say spoiler stuff now. So why don't we well, here, actually, let's play a word association game, and then we'll go to the spoilers.
Well, before we get to spoilers, is there anything we can say non-spoilers that is we're looking forward to in terms of the 3rd season, right?
War.
We haven't talked at all about Jon Snow's, and I am in fact looking forward to meeting the King of the North.
Yes.
Especially since we know he's played by Julius Caesar, right? We're looking forward to this, right? He's really good. He's going to be a really good Mance Rayder.
Also, just Jon Snow is if I did a survey of all the whatever 400 students I've taught this to now, Jon Snow and Arya are by far the favored characters in the series.
See, no, I mean, there's no. I mean, so I would say Tyrion. I mean, it wouldn't even.
It's not even close in terms of
fascinating.
Favors. It's Jon Snow and it's Arya.
And this is people who've watched the shows or have read books.
Both. They're required to. Or I failed them. But yeah, no, it's well, they read the first 2 books and they watch the first 2 seasons. But yeah, I think one is that a lot of them are females, of a certain age, and they see in Arya a character that they can
right. I get that.
And then I think just Jon Snow is the handsome bastard. I mean, he's Han Solo, he's Indiana Jones, he's not smart.
But he's not, right? He's not Han Solo. He's not Indiana Jones. But if he were Han Solo or Indiana Jones, he would not.
He wouldn't be the wall,
yeah.
He wouldn't have to take the black in the first place. But he has that sort of, I guess, more Indiana Jones. We'll call it witless charm, right? He just happens to say the right thing, very dashing while doing so.
Right.
So should we go to the spoiler section, or?
Let's do these questions. I'm ready for your questions.
All right, okay, so
I am prepared to answer your quiz.
I want you to say the first word that comes to your mind.
First word.
When I say the following things.
My mind. Wait. I'm going to put on my thinking cap. All right.
All right. Should I put on my questioning cap? I don't know. All right.
Crying out loud. All right, fine. I would call that your failure cap, but whatever.
Well, proud failure. Bill Buckner. Anyway, so first word comes to your mind, Green Lantern.
Resolve.
Rand Paul.
Anarchy.
The Donald.
Clown.
Glenn Greenwald.
Sorry. Commitment.
Piglet.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Piglet.
Dow.
I'm sorry, the correct answer for all of these was asshole. We have now reached the spoiler section of the show where we will ruin the entire rest of the series for those of you who are stupid enough to continue to listen, even though we warned you.
Yeah, let's be clear. We are going to be talking vigorously about spoilers that are happening through Book 5, potentially through Book 5.
Yes.
So if you have not read all 5 books, you should tune out now.
I mean, we should get it out of the way. I mean, Arya is a dragon. I mean, that we should just get that out of the way, right? That she's a. Now, all right. See, I was just testing the people to make sure that they knew that.
The dumbfounded look on my face should explain everything you need to know about that particular statement.
It's not true, but just in case.
Anyway, so going back to the stuff we hinted at before, we are going to see very soon, in my view, a character who has interacted with Joffrey, will soon interact with Dany. I think we're going to see that in the first couple episodes.
And that would be?
Sir Barristan Selmy. Barristan the Bold. The problem is,
we've seen this early?
No one is going to remember, if you have just seen the series, no one is going to remember who he is from the series. See,
I guess it's just because when I teach it, we spend so long on the 10th episode, mm-hmm. and in particular on the moment where he stands before Joffrey and Cersei and mm-hmm. Says that Ned is an honorable man, yada yada, and then throws down his shield. And I would remember him, but you think he's... Okay, the thing is in the novels, it works because of what we call in literature the Dickensian principle. The thing that allowed John Barth in the Saltweed Factor to have a man who is 5 foot tall, white, reappear later in the novel as a 7'3" black man. Right? You can do that in a novel. Like in Dickens, oh, I didn't recognize you. Of course not. I'm now 7 feet tall and black. And that is from the Saltweed Factor. But the Barth novel, I'm not saying Dickens wrote that. I wonder if you can hide a character that way. I mean, I really think you're going to be able to pull it off, right? I mean, you're going to have to count on people not remembering his face, which is as someone who watches so much television, and I'm always like, "Ooh, it's that guy from that he's from the thing." Well, but that's part of the point, right? I mean, you may have people IMDbing it, but you're going to have people not IMDbing it, right? And there are going to be people who understand it, and there are going to be people who don't. But he's going to appear with this, presumably this Gandalf-esque mane, and that's what I was alluding to before, right? Because he's the Gandalf figure here, right? Yeah. He is Gandalf, not Mormont, right? Selmy is Gandalf, who believes in Daenerys Targaryen, right? Because he has to believe in Daenerys Targaryen. He has no other choice but to believe in her. And he's going to show up knowing that she's the one, but he's going to show up in a way that I think it's going to be because he has time in that final episode. You're right. He doesn't have that much screen time in the rest of season 1, and more importantly, we are not exposed to the legend of Barristan the Bold
in the series in the same way that we are in the books, right? We don't get those stories of how Jaime Lannister grew up, worshiping him, right? And Ned Stark worshipped him, right? And how he was wounded at the battle defending Aegon Targaryen and so forth, right? We don't know that.
I could see it. And again, I think you're right. I think that most people who haven't taught the class and don't spend 3 hour-and-a-half long class periods teaching a particular episode probably don't have his face stuck in their head the way I do. And I think you're actually right. I think if he reappears with a long beard, no one will be the wiser, unless they're listening to this. In which case, we're sorry.
Listen, you fucked yourself up when you started listening to spoilers. Now, the second point about what we just talked about, I think that assuming we get to the 6th season or whatever, I think we probably would be in the 6th season, one of the emblematic moments of this series is going to be when Mormont captures Tyrion, right? When they come face to face, especially if we've gone like a full year without seeing Mormont, which if they do it right, that's what they'll do it.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't seen
Mormont. In
Mormont.
a dingy bar and where are they when that happens?
A hand reaches out, grabs Tyrion, right? And we see Mormont, right, for the first time, right? And he's drunk and he's dissipated and he looks
and the first time since he's admitted that he was never really helping Dany, but was in fact one of Varys' spies the whole time, right? One of the spiders, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be an emotion-laden moment, I think, when we are reunited, when those two characters who are broken are reunited with one another and suddenly rendered relevant, right? In some sense, right?
Well, I don't think Tyrion ever is going to become that irrelevant.
Well, but Tyrion does have Martin, to my ear, Martin really strained to keep Tyrion relevant after the events of Joffrey's wedding, right? It wasn't obvious to me why Tyrion remained a figure worth keeping alive for this broad conspiracy.
Well, and this is a bad analogy because it sort of has unwholesome implications, but Tyrion is sort of like in terms of playing the Game of Thrones, he's sort of like a Bobby Fischer figure. He's better than everyone else. He knows it. They know it. And he disappears for a while.
Right.
Which is, ignore all the, anti-Semitism and stuff that's Fisher, but it's sort of a similar thing. It's just the player of the game who comes back. And in fact, it's probably a lot closer to I can't remember the character's name in Hess's The Glass Bead Game. I don't know if you've ever read that. It's one of those big, complicated modernist novels that is too complicated, really, than it should be because you don't have to spend that much time explaining a game that doesn't exist. But they do anyway. But it's a monk who comes back and teaches people because he's better than everyone else and was always sort of destined to do this. And I see a couple of characters who have that potential. One, obviously, is Arya because she's been training to be a master assassin for a long time now.
Right.
Reciting the names and then losing her face, and she's gonna, and Tyrion is sort of her intellectual equivalent. Someone who is suffering on boats and in various bogs and will, however, get back to the seat of power, and in fact be one of the characters who does bridge Westeros and Essos. Although I think we're now in I think we're in book 18 at this point. But I don't see Tyrion as a sort of just afterthought after Joffrey's wedding. I think he's deliberately forgotten.
Right.
Because he can be.
Right.
He's just in terms of stock characters, he's just the jester. Right. Poor Horatio. I didn't realize he would come back from the fucking dead to haunt us. And, it's it's a little different than the Shakespeare, but
Right.
But yeah, the Mormont Tyrion scene is going to be sort of interesting to see. I'm sort of interested to see what they're going to do with Arya. I mean, how they're actually going to depict her, because she's turning into a heroic character right now, right? They keep building her up, but eventually she's going to have to undergo degradations that are horrible. And how do they do that without turning it into the Passion of the Christ?
Right. I mean, I'm not as. I think they'll be able to work those through, and because I can almost, and the reason is I can almost see those scenes playing out in my head. Right. I can see the scenes of her at what passes or whatever it is in Bravos, the House of the Dead. Right. I mean, I can see her without eyes, and they won't play out all of this, right? But a lot of those are sort of very tight. They strike me as, when I imagine them in my mind's eye, they are very tight scenes, right? I mean, I see telescoping, right? I mean, I do think we will get the scene of Arya and Sam in there, because we kind of have to get that scene, because we have to remind people that Arya's in the same series as these other people. But they won't have everything, but they'll have a lot, and it will cover sufficiently in television terms her journey, right? I mean, especially to the extent she keeps saying the names, right? I don't know. It should be interesting. It should be interesting how that plays out.
I think it will. I mean, the other two things that are, I mean, the one big obvious thing is the Red Wedding. I mean, how are they going to show that? Are they going to show the dog's head sewn onto it, or the direwolf sewn onto it? But here's my thing. Given that Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob does not actually get married to someone who's not a Frey in the book, does he?
No, he gets married. He marries. He marries. That's why he can't go back on it, right? He marries what her name is, Lady Jane or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. He marries the Frey. He doesn't marry anyone else.
No. He doesn't marry the Frey. No, he marries this woman who happens to be a Lannister henchman, right? The daughter of a Lannister henchman. They are actually married.
Okay. Because I was thinking, when I was rewatching the last episode, I was thinking, holy crap, are they setting it up to not have the Red Wedding?
Right.
Because that would be truly...
You can't not have the Red Wedding. That's absurd. Well,
but in terms of your expectations, if you want to confound us, let Rob live.
Yeah, no. Well, there's confounding, and then there's confounding, right? I mean, you would have to.
Well, given that the show now has a reputation for killing off important characters, yeah, I mean, it's almost like with Sean Bean. Given that he dies in every movie, one of the interesting things about the first season is that in episodes 7 and 8, there are signs that he might live. And for people like our age who have seen Sean Bean die a million times, we're thinking, holy shit, Sean Bean might survive this.
Right.
He might. There's a chance.
Oh, no,
and then they kill him anyway.
Yeah, no, my wife and I had a sort of classic moment, because I was very sort of deeply into the series, and the wife was also sort of very getting into it, but she had read ahead on Wikipedia, and I refused to read ahead on Wikipedia, and so I literally, straightforwardly, arrogant, it's like, why are you leaving right now, sweetie? This is absurd. He's not gonna lose his head. Why are you getting up from the couch and going into the other room as if you wanted to, not watch an execution? And and then he was executed. So that was sort of an embarrassing moment for me, right?
I can imagine that. I mean, structurally, it makes perfect sense, because the series opened with having a Starkchild, Bran, be forced to watch the execution of Will, and then in episode 9 we have Arya, another Starkchild, being told not to watch the execution. Those scenes are nicely bookending. I mean, structurally, they do. So I sort of knew he was going to die. And also because he's Sean fucking Bean. I've seen him die in Equilibrium, James Bond movie. He didn't just die in the James Bond movie. He like fell down 80 stories, landed on his back, and then like an oil platform fell on top of him and exploded. And then
I've been to that very telescope in Puerto Rico, though. It's quite nice.
It's a little overkill, but also the wind that shakes the barley. He died. I mean, he's died in so many things.
Right.
I just expect it, but I don't know.
But not Ronan again. He did not die.
Not Ronan. Just the one.
Mm-hmm.
I could see them keeping Rob alive a little longer. Like,
I mean, it says here in the Wikipedia, by the way, that he surprises his mother by telling her he has secretly married Lady Jane Westerly.
Okay.
So he does get married in the book.
Again, reading these things through the night. That was probably 4 a.m.
But again, this is another sort of I'm impressed by it. And I guess at this point it's not that impressive because Martin does not handle the marriage to Lady Jane all that impressively, right? I mean, it's like suddenly Robb Stark comes back and he's married, right? And this is transformative. And then that's
he's 15 years old. I mean, I can sort of see that. It's not very.
I can see it. I can explain it to myself. It's just not particularly compelling, right? I mean, and having some build up, having some explanation of how he meets this woman, how he finds her interesting. She tells interesting stories, which she does do. I mean, makes it an altogether more compelling narrative with regards to his decisions to betray Walter Frye.
So, what do you think about? For instance, what are they going to do with Kat at the Red Wedding? Do you think they're going to actually show her?
I think we're going to see her. I think we're going to see her corpse. We're going to see. I don't know if we'll see it in the river, but we're going to see her corpse. We're going to see her throat cut. I think we're going to see her throat cut at the end of the episode. It's going to be, we're going to see in a 2-minute sequence, the sword going through Robb Stark's back out of his chest, and then we are going to see her cutting the throat of the Frye's son, and then we're going to see her being killed.
That'd be a nice counterpoint to the what is it, episode 8 of season 1, where it ends with Littlefinger.
Right.
The last thing you see is Littlefinger with his knife at Ned's throat.
Right.
Except we'll see the cut. Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not looking forward to this. I mean, on the one hand, I think there's a good chance if they had not already given like an 8-year contract to the show that they would lose enough viewers with the Red Wedding.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially given how much they've earned with Robb Stark, right? I mean, the Robb Stark of the show is so much more. We have such more visceral attachment to him than the Robb Stark of just because of the way that the series is written, right? I mean, we know him. We know he's a hero. He has a heroic bearing. We approve of his decision to marry this woman, right?
Although, again, I will say, and I know it's not empirical evidence, but if you believe my students, fuck Rob. It's all about John and Arya. So we might not lose that much if Rob.
I have my doubts. So to the Daenerys storyline, being a political scientist, what interests me the most here is the transition that we're going to see, and we may see this play out over seasons 3, 4, and 5. I don't think we're going to see much. We're not going to see much of this in season 3. We're going to see Daenerys the Conqueror in season 3. Right. What's going to be interesting in terms of seasons 4 and 5 is Daenerys the ineffectual state builder, right? Which is hopefully from my point of view, going to be just a fascinating aspect, right? Her dealing with the problems that are associated with managing all of these territories that she has conquered in such a vigorous and, speedy fashion.
And also dysentery.
And dysentery, yes. The bloody flux, yeah. Everybody loves dysentery. I love dysentery. I mean, dysentery is a friend of mine. Dysentery is a friend of mine. I'll try not to sing that song anymore. Daenerys the state builder, and really the failed state builder, and even sort of the failed dragon master, is going to be one of the most interesting stories of seasons 4 and 5, or I anticipate of seasons 4 and 5.
Well, I had a historian friend tell me that and I won't say his name because he'll probably be upset with me if I do, but he basically said that Daenerys is very much a Grant figure. You know, someone great for the war, put her in charge, and everything falls apart.
That's interesting.
I hadn't actually thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
He told that to me over the phone today when I said, "Oh, I'm doing a podcast. We're going to be talking about Game of Thrones." It's like, "Oh yeah, well, you know my pet theory about Daenerys and Ulysses S. Grant." I was like, "No, okay, I see that. Yeah." I mean, on the one hand, the rhetoric that's been used about dragons on the show, and in the last 3 episodes of season 2, in one scene where, you know, Varys actually is talking to Tyrion on the ramparts of King's Landing, and they're talking about what if she really has dragons. It'll be 3 years, you know. It'll be 3 years before she can get here, but then, of course, it's over. Like, this is the equivalent of the bomb, right? It's not... Martin is not being shy with the metaphor here. He who has the dragons has the bomb. It's a matter of how they can effectively manipulate that power without actually having to wield it, which, of course, is probably why it's interesting to political scientists. I mean,
right. Well, I mean, there's a civil-military relation. If you want to sort of dive deep into the metaphor, there's a civil-military relations issue that develops, you know, in seasons in the 4th and 5th books with regards to her relationship with the dragons, which is that she has this profound power, but the dragons don't stay under her control for as long as she wants, right? I mean, they don't follow her just because she's Targaryen, right? They start doing horrible things because, you know, check it out, they're gigantic fire-breathing reptiles.
Yeah.
And gigantic fire. What's that?
And they're hungry.
And they're hungry, and they eat.
I mean, I have cats who are not giant fire-breathing reptiles. They are tiny mammals with teeth, and yet they make my life miserable when they get hungry.
Oh, goodness gracious! And if you tripled the size of your house cats, imagine what they would do to you in your sleep.
I know.
Right. And then take your average iguana and, you know, multiply it by 30. Right.
And let it breathe fire.
And let it breathe fire. Right. This is the troubling development. Right. And Daenerys obviously discovers that this is a troubling development.
But at the same time, they do love her, which is something you can never actually say about the bomb. The bomb never loved the people with their fingers on the button. The bomb didn't give a shit. Democrat, Republican, it didn't care.
The bomb loved Dr. Manhattan.
Or Manhattan was the bomb.
Loved Dr. Manhattan.
But I think, and now we're getting to places where we're not even in spoiler mode because the books haven't even gone there yet. Like what Dany does with the dragons, and so meta spoiler. There are things we don't know about Dany and the dragons. Also, Jon Snow may be alive or he may be dead. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, listen. I mean, I don't think it's a leap to say we're going to have more Jon Snow perspective chapters, right? I mean, obviously, if other Red Wizards can sort of bring back the dead, I'm sure that Melisandre can manage this problem with regards to Jon Snow.
I think
he's
so.
Not even dead, badly injured. He's badly injured the last time we see him.
Yeah, but I think, to be honest, the most interesting thing, and the thing that my students, who some of whom are crazy, and in a 10-week quarter, actually go and read all the books because they just get hooked, and they probably fail their chem classes and mechanical engineering and all those things that have to do with important infrastructure jobs. But you know, they come back to me, and one of the things that they're always fascinated by and always want to kind of look back at is Bran. And we haven't talked about Bran at all. The fact that Bran is there from the beginning. Every time the wind blows and a character kind of, you know, is like, who farted? Who farted? Who farted? Right? That's Bran talking to them from the future into the... And it makes a really interesting recursive argument for the total uselessness of prophecy. Right? I mean, Bran has been there the entire time,
right,
trying to warn them. Every tree they walk by is telling them, you know, what the fuck? What the fuck? Don't do that. What the fuck? And they're like, oh, they just keep going. And this infuriates my students Because my students are like, why don't they listen to the trees? To which I reply, yes, you're a very Californian, you know.
In Oregon, I have to say it's different in Oregon. We listen to the trees in Oregon, which is how I ended up where I am, in Kentucky.
With the meth.
We haven't talked that much about the Bran Rickon storyline. You know,
Who's that?
Perhaps the nastiest villain in the whole series. I don't know if he's the nastiest. Joffrey's pretty bad, but you know, Ramsay Snow Bolton.
Yeah, well,
is going to be, you know, he's sort of Joffrey concentrated, right? I mean, whether we'll get that is a different question, right? We didn't get that in season 2. We were supposed to get him in season 2, right?
It was mentioned at the end of season 2 that he was close to Winterfell. There's
no, he was there. He was there in Winterfell at the end of season 2. No, he was
there by the end. But
no, he was captured in Winterfell.
Wait, what?
In the second book, right? He was the guy who liberated Winterfell.
That hasn't happened yet, though, in the show.
No. He was the one who Theon Greyjoy captured him at Winterfell. He had been, he was the stinky guy, Reek.
No, that's Theon.
No. Well, Theon becomes Reek, but Ramsay Snow was the stinky guy that Theon captured, and then who offered, say, I'm going to go and find you an army, and I'm going to bring it back.
I didn't even make that connection.
He was a prisoner. Yes, no, he was a prisoner at Winterfell when Theon captured it.
Yes, everyone, that sound you heard was my authority, just kind of moving out. Yeah, I didn't. Oh, yeah, okay. I was thinking more of the books, but no, you're right. He is the sort of purest sociopath that we have on the show. He's outside of a grown-up Joffrey. He's the one who seems to enjoy pain for its own sake the most.
Right. No, he butchers people. He skins them. You know, he comes from a bad family. Right. I mean, there's a pretty problematic sort of aspect. You know, that he's a child of rape, and because he's a child of rape, that he is such a horrible person. Right. But yeah, no, we should have met him already. We will meet him soon, I suspect. Well, because, you know, in the second book, he is the one who burns down Winterfell.
Yeah.
Right. But in the series, you know, just sort of Bran and Rickon come up, and Winterfell's been burned down, and they don't understand why, and they don't explain why Winterfell's been burned down.
No, actually, you're right. In fact, I was noticing that, and I sort of didn't follow it when I was watching the last episode of the second season, that they sort of rise from the ashes, you know, Osha and Bran and Rickon, and then and Hodor, and then
Hodor.
And then they have the nice little scene with the Meister, and then they cut to Dany in the House of the Dead, and then they go back to Winterfell. Yeah, no, I wonder what they're going to do with Theon, because, I mean, once he becomes Reek, he becomes sympathetic again. And it's something that, again, sort of going back to what we were talking about with Dickens earlier, like, that works in a novel if you can't connect the dots at first. Mm-hmm. If you just see, or if you just read about this character who's obviously tormented, toothless, missing fingers and toes, terrible things have happened to him, you sympathize with him. But if they do that in the series, it's obviously going to be what's his name? He has a song written after him.
Alfie,
yeah.
Alfie,
I mean,
yeah,
it's going to be him, and I don't know if people are going to be as forgiving.
Well, they're not at first, right? You know, they're going to, how I presume it will happen on something like this, that we will have some sort of explication for several episodes of Ramsay Bolton's incredible awfulness, which is not hard because he's like Joffrey, only smarter. And then we're going to have sort of we are going to have this moment of recognition. You know, it's going to be like this, where he has his head down, we're just going to see his hair, and then it's going to lift up like this. And it's going to be Theon. And we're going to say, the first thing we're going to say is, and it's going to be an interesting process, because the first thing we're going to say is, well,
fuck you.
Fucker deserved it, right? Fucker deserved it, right? Which he obviously did. But
he thought he killed Bran.
Right. but then we are going to rebuild sympathy for him, just sort of straightforwardly out of the horror of his experience. Right. Sort of another great moment is going to be this, and I hope they play it right because it needs to be played right. When Stannis reappears as the hero at the Battle of the Wall, right? After not having seen Stannis, and Stannis not being a sympathetic figure, they have done that correctly. Stannis is not a charismatic figure. He is not a sympathetic figure. He is Stannis Baratheon is the Glenn Greenwald of Westeros. Right. And he is going to be the hero of the Battle of the Wall, right? He's going to show up there and he's going to defeat Mance Rayder. And it's going to be after several episodes, many episodes in which we haven't thought of Stannis Baratheon at all. But he is going to return in kingly fashion at this point, and that's going to be a tremendous moment.
You think it's going to happen this season?
I don't think it's going to happen this season.
No,
I think season 4, I think it's going to happen. But I'm not sure. I really don't know.
So don't get excited, Glenn. It's a fun time.
Well, I'm proud of that. I had not thought of that before, but I think that's right. Stannis Baratheon is the Glenn Greenwald of Westeros.
The end of these chats are probably going to get us in trouble. My joke over there, and then this thing, and all of the Piglet, plushy fiends are going to get on me for calling him an asshole. And also Mona. But I hadn't thought about that because in my memory, Stannis is much more memorable for his kind of futile trek to Winterfell after being at the Wall. The "Are we there yet?" kind of that seems to go on endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really want to see that. And it's weird. One of the things that my wife and I have sort of agreed upon is that our least favorite character in the novels is Davos. Just like his chapters are up there with Sansa's as just the worst. But in the series, I really sort of want to see, like, I would be totally into a spin-off, Davos.
Right.
The Onion guy. Like, just I could totally deal with that because he's one of the few. Jon Snow's a bastard, obviously.
Right.
But we don't have many actual poor people who matter in this series. In fact, one of the things that annoys me is this, sort of the reliance on bloodlines. It's when I teach the class and we talk about the American Revolution, for example, and how the Dothraki are actually very much more democratic because as long as you can ride a horse and can't be killed by a Dothraki, you can be a Dothraki, right? What color are they? The same color as everyone else because you're all riding in the fucking sun all day long. And that's sort of more democratic than the idea that you have royal blood because that's the idea that we've gotten away from in America. We don't like royal blood. Royal blood is bad, except everyone, sympathizes with Dany and, Davos is the only one who, and I have to keep saying Davos because I'm always tempted to say Davros, which would be a completely different series. If Davros, the man who invented the Daleks, was actually that would make for a completely different series. Equally entertaining, I think, but in a very different way. But Davos is one of the only characters whose blood doesn't matter. He's not Ironborn. He's not, he doesn't have the Stark line.
Mance Rayder.
Stark line. He's not a Lannister. He's not a pure Lannister, right?
Mance Rayder.
Mance Rayder and Davos. Right. Davos is a guy who had a boat full of onions.
Yeah. He's a smuggler. He's a smuggler.
I would like to see more of him in the series. I don't think we're going to get it because, obviously, I think the series is playing off the appeal of the regal and of the trueborn. But, we can hope that it's, like, democratic and American as opposed to this,
Well, in some sense, right, Mormont is that, right? Because Mormont plays the poor figure because he happens to be a poor nobleman, right? And so, to some extent, we sympathize with his poverty, his relative poverty, because he doesn't have very many small folk to dominate and exploit. And so, he's that.
I don't think many of us sympathize with not having enough poor people to exploit.
I sympathize, but I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not. If you only have 6,000 poor people to exploit, then you're barely worth being. Well, listen. Okay, let's connect this to, as I am fond of saying, the academy is the last refuge of the feudal system, right? In modern life, right, where we have, not nobles by blood, but we have this sort of relic of feudal privilege through the sort of the various ranks and hierarchies of professor, from professor to associate to assistant to adjunct and so forth, right? And there's this domination of the small folk, whether they be, sort of our knights in waiting who are graduate students or the undergraduates, right? I mean, there's such a feudal feel, right? Especially in terms of the inability of our kings, the department chairs and the associated deans and so forth, to actually enforce their will upon the faculty, right? I mean, deans say stuff all the time the faculty don't pay attention to. Chairs say stuff all the time that faculty don't pay attention to, right? And there's something so feudal to that relationship that is just so reminiscent of, or there are such parallels between this and the world of Game of Thrones.
I don't know. I tend to think of it more in strictly sort of in terms of preterition, because I've seen so many students of my generation, grad students, we've just been passed over. It's not a matter of.
There's like a Bruce Springsteen song in here somewhere. I mean, do you want me to start singing the Bruce Springsteen song that might apply to this?
One of the many. We could go with Badlands. Brilliant Disguise might even work. Our Advisors. Fuck you. But it's just in terms of, I don't see academia as a feudal system because there was at least order there, whereas here there's complete randomness and chaos. And
what do you think the Crusades were about?
Weeding out graduate students.
I think that's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was.
If you came back, great. You could be Robin Hood and have a job at Harvard, but for the most part, you're fine. I mean, it's weird. Among my colleagues, and UCI was ranked when I came in as like the number 5 or 6 English department of the country, and the most prestigious of my colleagues right now has dual appointments at Harvard and Brown, and he's only taken those because his side job is he's James Franco's personal tutor.
That's awesome.
So he is the guy who is responsible. I don't want to say that because, sorry. You're not responsible for him, but his public statements. But I mean, it's like, University of Maryland, shit creek is sort of the best that we've gotten. And we're at a good public program. And look at someone like, Aaron Batty, right, who is now writing, for the New Inquiry. He's everywhere. Everyone loves Aaron. By the way, I made him. He was just a no-name blogger until I invited him to join the Valve. Aaron, you owe me money. But
Aaron is awesome. I love Aaron. He's awesome.
No, he's great.
I love his. He's a little bit too pro Glenn Greenwald, but
Yeah, I'll take care of that on April. He's giving a talk at the Babel conference out at UCI, so I will give him the what for about that. But he's had no luck. I mean, and he's at Berkeley, a better school than on that. He's not only at Berkeley, he's writing for one of the premier leftist magazines in the country. No bites. Like, the feudal system implies an order that I don't think we have. I think we've gotten way off of Game of Thrones, though. I think I'm just now bitching about
Right. We should probably wrap up since this podcast is closing in on an hour and a half.
Oh, they love us. You love us. You know you love us.
Listen, I'm sure that the three people who have managed to get their way through this love us, right? I mean, that's almost true by definition.
Yes.
So,
it takes.
although, granted, the people who love me, like my wife, they would never sit here and listen to me for longer than 15 minutes.
Yeah, they hear the shit from me all the time. Yeah.